It is bringing entertainment to thousands of people. Through its magic, we are able to enjoy a combination of the radio, motion pictures, and the stage, right in the comfort of our own homes, simply by pushing a button and turning a dial.
I don't have to tell you things are bad. Everybody knows things are bad.
These cells with their electrical charges are scanned by a stream of electrons, completing 30 pictures a second. Compare that crude picture with these of today, and you can judge for yourself how far along the road to perfection television has traveled.
We know the air is unfit to breathe and our food is unfit to eat. We sit watching our TVs while some local newscaster tells us that today we had 15 homicides and 63 violent crimes, as if that's the way it's supposed to be. We know things are bad, worse than bad. They're crazy.
The greatest social messages are promoted through movies and drama, high drama, through the fixation of emotive sequences, emotional sequences, not logical, factual sequences, but pushing points across in an emotional way which register and fix in the mind. So emotional content is very, very important, rather than going through an actual discussion or an argument using logic and facts. There's no debate. And when you're being downloaded through fiction, your guard is down, the censor part of your brain is not in action. It isn't saying, yes, I agree with this, I disagree with that, as you would in a debate or a lecture. You're actually in an alpha state, being completely downloaded with new ideas.
The only truth you know is what you get over this tube. Right now, there is an entire generation that never knew anything that didn't come out of this tube.
Who's Britney Spears' ex-husband? Kevin Federline.
Kevin Federline. Kevin Federline. K-Fed.
Most people still today think that all entertainment to do with movies, drama, is therefore nothing more than their entertainment. It never ever was that case.
I believe this passionately, that we don't grow into creativity, we grow out of it. Or rather, we get educated out of it.
Is the world flat?
Is the world flat?
Yes. I don't know. What do you think? I never thought about it, Whoopi. Is the world flat?
This tube is the gospel, the ultimate revelation. This tube can make or break presidents, popes, prime ministers. This tube is the most awesome goddamn force in the whole godless world. And woe is us if it ever falls into the hands of the wrong people.
Our education system has mined our minds in the way that we strip mine the earth for a particular commodity. And for the future, it won't serve us. We have to rethink the fundamental principles on which we're educating our children.
What is the Bill of Rights?
Oh, it's,
The Bill of, oh, I know what you're doing. I know what the Bill of Rights is. What are the Bill of Rights?
I don't know. Freedom of speech. Oh, right? Wait. Isn't there neighbor one? Bear arms. And, it's like, we learned in politics, but I wasn't really listening.
Television is not the truth. Television is a goddamn amusement park. Television is a circus, a carnival, a traveling troupe of acrobats, storytellers, dancers, singers, jugglers, sideshow freaks, lion tamers, and football players.
Throughout history, social engineers have refined techniques designed to control large populations.
About 100 years ago, this big organization with many branches, they wanted to rule the world basically using Britain as a nucleus of a system, an embryo, which also was going to be joined with the US under the Anglo-American establishment, wrote about the kind of culture and the changes of culture over a 100-year period that they would actually design, implement and bring in. And H.G. Wells talked about it too. He talked about arenas. And he says arenas could be put up across the world for sports, for instance. Now at that time, sports was something that children, school children were into. Adults became adults and got onto adult things. So it was unimaginable at the time that people could actually believe that there was even a need for adult sports and entertainment, never mind having arenas built. across the world. But he said we can do this and foist basically a sports culture for the males. Using a tribal system, we're all tribal to an extent. That's why we even bother to vote for a tribal leader. This is well understood. That's why we're supplied with these leaders. And because the average man was to become more disengaged from his own destiny as the expert class arose, it was decided that the males would get their outlet, basically, gradually becoming helpless as males through sports. Therefore, they'd have a tribal team they could identify with. They could cheer them on as they were winning. In their own personal lives, they were getting nowhere. They were getting disenfranchised, in a sense, as experts took over decision-making for them in all kinds of fields. So this was psychology at use, planned before they even implemented the sports. When radio came along, of course, they used that to the maximum. Sports for the men, soaps basically for the women, and then in came television, as I say, with its alpha state, its hypnotic state. And sure enough, around the 1960s, really, 50s and 60s, it took off. It really, really took off. And men became glued on Saturday nights to the sports shows. A culture industry, which is called by its own the culture industry. The Soviet Union had a department called the culture industry. Their actors and directors were called the cultural leaders, because they would, like a computer, people are like computers, all you have to do is keep giving them new updates every so often, and you can change an entire country or a nation or a block of nations who are all getting the same upgrades at the same time along certain paths. Today we call it political correctness. Most people want to belong to their peer group. They want to be the same as everyone else when it comes to opinions. In fact, they judge their own personal sanity by bouncing ideas off their neighbors and friends who will answer back and agree on these same topics in kind. It doesn't matter if the topics or what you're given are facts or utter nonsense, as long as everyone agrees at the same time. You'll say, well, I'm sane, and your friends will all agree because they've had the same information given to them.
Our education system is predicated on the idea of academic ability, and there's a reason. The whole system was invented around the world. There were no public systems of education really before the 19th century. They all came into being to meet the needs of industrialism. So the hierarchy is rooted on two ideas. Number one, that the most useful subjects for work are at the top. So you were probably steered benignly away from things at school when you were a kid, things you liked, on the ground you would never get a job doing that. Is that right? Don't do music, you're not going to be a musician. Don't do art, you won't be an artist. Benign advice. Now, profoundly mistaken. The whole world is engulfed in a revolution.
But they've been programmed. And I'm sad because I know that it's hard for people like that to take an interest, a serious interest in world affairs, to take a serious interest in what their elected officials are doing. And they're not going to be really inclined to study or discover the deception that's being used against them. And so I'm sad because I see all of that in a flash in my mind as being an indication of how easy it is for the masses to be manipulated.
The scientific dictatorship understands what makes human beings tick. They understand our psychology. They've studied it, and they're using it against us. But the minute the public awakens to the fact that there is an agenda to manipulate them, and the second the public realizes that they are being conditioned and controlled, the establishment begins to lose that edge they've got over people. So all I ask viewers to do is to think for themselves and to study public relations, to study advertising, to study propaganda, and to realize how much of it is out there in their daily lives. And then make the decision for yourself. I just want people to think on their own and to not have their decisions and their thoughts and their ideas pre-packaged and basically downloaded into them.
You're beginning to believe the illusions we're spinning here. You're beginning to think that the tube is reality and that your own lives are unreal. You do whatever the tube tells you. You dress like the tube. You eat like the tube. You raise your children like the tube. You even think like the tube.
If it's on TV and a famous face says something, then it must be true. He doesn't have to show you facts or anything else. You've been brought up with these faces. That's why they keep these guys on television into their 70s and 80s. You've grown up with this father figure who's on television every night at 6 o'clock, in your house, in your room, staring right at you, and he's a father figure. Would he tell you a lie?
And you're never going to get any truth from us. We'll tell you anything you want to hear. We lie like hell. We'll tell you that Kojak always gets the killer and that nobody ever gets cancer in Archie Bunker's house. And no matter how much trouble the hero is in, don't worry, just look at your watch. At the end of the hour, he's going to win. We'll tell you any shit you want to hear.
So you naturally never suspect him. And this same man will lead you through new topics. He'll introduce experts on the topics. They'll have a little summary at the end of every talk, and you are now left with the conclusion that's presented to you. You don't arrive at it, it's given to you, and it's good enough for you.
When I was growing up, people were talking on their front porches, neighbors were playing baseball, there were nightly barbecues. You don't see that anymore. We've lost our communities. You drive through neighborhoods, you see the blue glow of television sets. We're losing our humanity. So, if you want to rebel against the globalists, the social engineers, start by turning the TV off a few hours a day and actually getting to know your neighbors. Getting outside that comfort zone, expanding your horizons. By coming together as communities, by getting to know our neighbors, we defeat the social engineers.
We deal in illusions, man. None of it is true. But you people sit there day after day, night after night, all ages, colors, creeds. We're all you know.
We're programmed today perfectly, just like machines.
I want you to get mad.
We tie this in with the Brzezinski. Brzezinski said in 2 Ages. Now this guy was way up with the NSA. He's a master geopolitician. He admits he works in 20, 50-year periods to do with geopolitics in other countries. But he said himself, the public will shortly be unable to think or reason for themselves. It was meaning by the form of information that was given to them, the type, the formulas that were in use then in the 1970s. He says, eventually they'll be unable to think or reason for themselves. And eventually, he said, they will expect the media to do all their thinking and reasoning for them. Well, that's happened today. That's why people today can't think outside of the programming from television.
Here stands the new man. His conception of reality is a dance of electronic images fired into his forebrain, a gossamer construction of his masters designed so that he will not under any circumstances perceive the actual or the real. His happiness is delivered to him through a tube or an electronic connection. His God lurks behind an electronic curtain, and when the curtain is pulled away, we find the CIA sorcerer and the media manipulator. Jim Keith, Mind Control, Mass Control, just one of the fine books on the manipulation of consciousness that he did before he sadly basically was killed. He was one of the people, I think, one of few who understood that the real war is a war on consciousness. It's very important to always remember that it may have so many other permutations. Now we're seeing it, mass killings in America or what have you. But and then all heads turn. As soon as that comes on the little media-framed image, then people are shocked, and they turn to that as if it's some sort of freak phenomena or something like that. It's actually, the sad case is it's not freak. And anyone who's really studied mind control understands that mind control is ubiquitous. It's almost the question of who is not mind controlled, as opposed to who is mind controlled. It's just a difference in degree. The whole question of what is consciousness and how it can be manipulated is one of the most crucial questions of our time. In my work, it really goes along with the whole question of the origins of evil. I mean, it's origins of evil / war on consciousness. and the whole manipulation of man's thinking, his behavior, his biology. And this question has distinguished some of the greatest scholars in the world, people like Wilhelm Reich. But in a more modern context, even people like Alex Constantine, Jim Keefe, Jim Marrs to a certain extent has gone into this.
Well, in ancient times they used the sword and they used the gun and they used other methods like religion for pushing the populace around and getting people to do what was wanted. But in recent times, in the 20th century, there are new technologies that provide the expertise to control people totally without their knowledge. Means of electronic entrainment, brain control implants, methods of advertising that manipulate us against our will. And this isn't science fiction. This is something that's very documented. The Manchurian Candidate, of course, was about the creation of a mind-controlled assassin.
Take this scarf and strangle Ed Mavoli to death.
Yes, ma'am. Excuse me, ma'am. All right.
Hey, Sarge, cut it up. What? Quiet, Ed, please. Now you just sit there quietly and cooperate.
Yes, ma'am.
In a way, I think that we've been prepared for mind control throughout our lives through techniques like TV, which perhaps I'm more exaggerating it, but in a way, TV turns the population into unthinking drones. At the same time, many people have commented that our schooling system isn't designed to create people who will think, but to create people who will take orders. So in many ways, I believe that we have been prepared for effective mind control for a very long time.
I think you'd have to conclude the whole purpose of public education throughout the world is to produce university professors.
This is mass madness, you maniacs! In God's name, you people are the real thing. We are the illusion. I'm a human being, God damn it! My life has value! So turn off your television sets, turn them off now, turn them off right now, turn them off and leave them off, turn them off right in the middle of the sentence I'm speaking to you now, turn them off!
Just look at us. Everything is backwards, everything is upside down. Doctors destroy health, lawyers destroy justice, universities destroy knowledge, governments destroy freedom, the major media destroys information, and religions destroy spirituality. That's where we are. And the elephant in the living room is that there are two streams of reality going on together. One is a secret agenda to create a global fascist centralized dictatorship to dictate to and control on every level every man, woman, and child on the planet. Going alongside that is what I call the movie. That's the version of the world that we are given through the mainstream media, through what we call education. And that is to explain away the changes going on, which are actually the agenda coming in a coordinated way, but the movie's there to explain them away in an uncoordinated fashion so we don't see where it's really going. Those days for so many people are now over because we can see where it's going.
I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
We are bored. We're all bored now.
But has it ever occurred to you, Wally, that the process that creates this boredom that we see in the world now may very well be a self-perpetuating, unconscious form of brainwashing created by a world totalitarian government based on money, and that all of this is much more dangerous than one thinks, and it's not just a question of individual survival, Wally, but that somebody who's bored is asleep, and somebody who's asleep will not say no? See, I keep meeting these people. I mean, just a few days ago, I met this man whom I greatly admire. He's a Swedish physicist, Gustav Bjornstrand, and he told me that he no longer watches television, he doesn't read newspapers, and he doesn't read magazines. He's completely cut them out of his life because he really does feel that we're living in some kind of Orwellian nightmare now, and that everything that you hear now contributes to turning you into a robot. And when I was at Findhorn, I met this extraordinary English tree expert who had devoted his life to saving trees. Just got back from Washington, lobbying to save the redwoods. He's 84 years old. He always travels with a backpack because he never knows where he's going to be tomorrow. And when I met him at Findhorn, he said to me, "Where are you from?" And I said, "New York." He said, "Ah, New York, yes, that's a very interesting place. Do you know a lot of New Yorkers who keep talking about the fact that they want to leave but never do?" And I said, "Oh, yes." And he said, "Why do you think they don't leave?" I gave him different banal theories. He said, "Oh, I don't think it's that way at all." He said, "I think that New York is the new model for the new concentration camp, where the camp has been built by the inmates themselves, and the inmates are the guards, and they have this pride in this thing they've built. They've built their own prison, and so they exist in a state of schizophrenia, where they are both guards and prisoners, and as a result, they no longer have, having been lobotomized, the capacity to leave the prison they've made, or to even see it as a prison." And then he went into his pocket and he took out a seed for a tree and he said, "This is a pine tree." He put it in my hand and he said, "Escape before it's too late." See, actually for 2 or 3 years now, Chiquita and I have had this very unpleasant feeling that we really should get out. And we really should feel like Jews in Germany in the late 30s. Get out of here. Of course, the problem is where to go, because it seems quite obvious that the whole world is going in the same direction. See, I think it's quite possible that the 1960s represented the last burst of the human being before he was extinguished, and that this is the beginning of the rest of the future now, and that from now on there'll simply be all these robots walking around, feeling nothing, thinking nothing, and there'll be nobody left almost to remind them that there once was a species called a human being, with feelings and thoughts, and that history and memory are right now being erased, and soon nobody will really remember that life existed on the planet. Now, of course, Bjornstrand feels that there's really almost no hope, and that we're probably going back to a very savage, lawless, terrifying period. Findhorn people see it a little differently. They're feeling that there'll be these pockets of light springing up in different parts of the world, and that these will be, in a way, invisible planets on this planet. And that as we, or the world, grow colder, we can take invisible space journeys to these different planets, refuel for what it is we need to do on the planet itself, and come back. And it's their feeling that there have to be centers now where people can come and reconstruct a new future for the world. And when I was talking to Gustav Bjornstrand, he was saying that actually these centers are growing up everywhere now. And that what they're trying to do, which is what Findhorn was trying to do, and in a way, what I was trying to do. I mean, these things can't be given names, but in a way, these are all attempts at creating a new kind of school or a new kind of monastery. And Bjornstrand talks about the concept of reserves, islands of safety, where history can be remembered and the human being can continue to function in order to maintain the species through a dark age. In other words, we're talking about an underground, which did exist in a different way during the Dark Ages among the mystical orders of the Church. And the purpose of this underground is to find out how to preserve the light, life, the culture, how to keep things living. You see, I keep thinking that what we need is a new language, a language of the heart, languages in the Polish forest where language wasn't needed, some kind of language between people that is a new kind of poetry, that's the poetry of the dancing bee that tells us where the honey is. And I think that in order to create that language, you're going to have to learn how you can go through a looking glass into another kind of perception where you have that sense of being united to all things, and suddenly you understand everything.